Welcome to Good Life. I'm Dean Wilson. I'm so glad you're with us. You can always find us at goodlifetelevision.org. We're brought to you by the Turner Foundation here in Santa Barbara, California. So if you're watching on TV Santa Barbara, we welcome you. Or if you're online all over the world, we welcome you as well. We're so grateful. We're talking about the good stuff. A lot of great people at goodlifetelevision.org, and hope you'll check out some of those stories. The long form interviews as well as the power clips, and you can find us on all the social media platforms as well. So we're just glad you're with us. This is a place where we're talking about good things, and one of the things that we love is law enforcement. And so Senior Deputy Mike Baker is with me. He's with Ventura County Sheriff's Department, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did I get that right?
Absolutely.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks
Nice
for
to
coming.
be here.
We do love law enforcement. It's so important, such an important part of our life in the United States, and I want to make sure that we honor folks like you for the work you've done. And so you've been doing this for 30 years?
32 years in March.
32 years.
Good Lord, that makes me feel old.
No, you're not old. What's that like, 32 years in law enforcement? Because I hear a lot of things about the profession, just the burnout, what you take home, you know, what's on your shoulders, the things you see that those of us that aren't in law enforcement don't see.
Sure.
How have you kind of navigated that over 32 years?
You know, it's interesting. There's a lot of diversion after the job, before the job, right? You know, when you come home, a lot of stuff that you do to keep yourself occupied. Me personally, 32 years has gone by like that. I mean, it's crazy how fast. But I think the thing that has really kept me through is the people that I've worked with, the partners that I've had. I've got one brother by birthright with my folks, and two brothers that I've worked with over the last 30 years who are both now retired. And it's those connections, the people connections that you have, that really helps you get through, because they're the ones that help kind of get you through situations. We've been through a lot, and it keeps you sane. You know, so it's the people you work with. That's important.
Yeah, I mean, people don't call you for good news.
Not always.
There's not something good happening when you're called.
No.
I mean, you show up to scenes of difficulty, violence, family, talk about that. Being in the line of work where literally, I mean, I'm sure we're going to talk about some of the good stuff.
Sure, no worries.
But the difficult stuff, I mean, how have you what's that like?
You know, for me, it's always been, ever since I signed on, when I first started, I knew I was going into a profession where I wore my briefcase around my belt or around my waist. I drove my office around instead of going to an office and carrying a briefcase every day. So I knew there was going to be stuff, right, for lack of a better term, things that I would see. And there have been things that they put you on the spot and they go home with you. You wake up in the middle of the night and you think about these things. You go through a little post-traumatic stress. But really, when you expect it, when you go into a profession knowing what you're getting into, you equip yourself a lot better to deal with that. One of the things that I used to train with trainees and recruits in the academy is mindset. And in law enforcement, you'll hear a lot about mindset, having the right mindset, you know, looking at the positive outcome going into a situation, preparing yourself. And mindset is everything. 99% of success comes from motivation and hard work, right? But for the mindset, 99% of a successful outcome comes from setting your mind right, knowing that you're going to succeed, you're going to live, you're going to survive, you're going to go home at the end of shift. So I think that helps prepare a person in law enforcement for looking at the ugliness in life.
Yeah.
And then, of course, being able to mitigate that after hours and deal with it instead of just stuffing it down inside of you and carrying it with you. Certain things never leave you, don't get me wrong, but otherwise you have to, expect it, what you're going to get into, and deal with it accordingly.
Yeah, mindset, that's really good. That's good for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. It applies to everything in life.
Yeah, that's interesting. You spent the bulk of your career in patrol.
Right, about 15 give
years.
or take years.
Okay, and then what caused you to transition into kind of some of this other stuff?
Well, in law enforcement, at least with my department, as most departments in the state of California, you have certain assignments that you can do. So when we graduate the academy for my department, the Sheriff's Department of Ventura County, we go to custody typically. And we spend a few years in custody, not because we did anything bad.
Spent a few years in custody.
But, yeah, so I always tell people, "Yeah, what'd you do when you started the job?" "I went to jail." But then you rotate out to patrol. So those are the two cruxes for, or the two basic jobs that you have in the Sheriff's Department. And then from there we have, a multitude of different jobs. And based on what you want to get into is what you can get into. So we can work in detectives, canines, the air unit, SWAT, narcotics, intel, special enforcement, crime prevention. There's a bunch of different assignments and then different collateral jobs, because a lot of what we do on the department is run on collateral assignments, which means it's something you do in addition to your regular job.
I see.
So, if I was working, let's say, in the crime prevention unit, and I was assigned to the honor guard or the hostage team or tactical negotiations, that's something we do in addition to that job. It's not a full-time assignment.
Wow.
So,
have you done hostage negotiation?
Oh yeah, I did that for about 14 years.
Really?
That was fun. Because I'm a big guy, right? I'm a big, huge cop and everything, but it's bigger people than me. Don't laugh. It's not that funny. But no, I learned early on that being a leprechaun in law enforcement, I have to learn how to use this to talk somebody into handcuffs. And so I learned early on that I could talk a lot, talk a good game. Most people told me that I could sell ice to an Eskimo. And
do you use humor?
Oh God, no. Humor is terrible. Yes, I use humor all the time. Sorry. Sarcasm, double entendre, everything. But
so all that comes into play.
Yeah, absolutely. Hostage negotiations. Okay, so let me say it. Hostage negotiations is what we used to call it for the longest time. It's now tactical negotiations, because in 32 years and 14 years on the hostage team, I never actually had a bona fide, with a hostage, somebody holding him to a gun.
Right.
I've had a guy holding a gun to himself.
Right.
But typically it's somebody who's barricaded. So it's tactical negotiations is what we call it now.
And so what do you say to the guy who's got a gun to his head?
Put the gun down. And then you go from there.
Okay.
First thing is you want to clear your bases. Hey, can you do me a favor and just put the gun down?
Just put the gun down.
And they say no, and then we move on to something else. But
okay, what else?
But
what else?
It's really okay. So tactical negotiations is this whole dynamic. We have a team of intel gatherers. We have a primary negotiator and a secondary negotiator. And typically we're not face to face like this with a guy with a gun. That's not too smart, because you don't want the gun turned on you.
Right.
But you usually have some ulterior means of communication, either by a telephone. We deploy a throw phone that we can have a closed circuit conversation with them. Maybe their cell phone. So there's a lot of different dynamics, but we wind up trying to get into the why and how they came to be where they are in crisis. Recognize the fact that they're in crisis. So they're not going to respond to the put the gun down, put the gun down, put the gun down. Right?
Right.
Stop resisting. You see that a lot. So you have to stop and listen. And then you have your team that's working on gathering intelligence as to the why the person is in the crisis that they're in, and use those pieces of intelligence to sort of get your hooks in, to get a rapport. Once you establish a rapport, it brings them from that crisis down a little bit, and then they start to gain trust in you, and you start to negotiate their surrender. A lot of times in the team, we'd always say, they want a helicopter, $1 million, and a trip to Aruba, and we give them a Big Mac and a pat on the head and put them in jail, at the end of it. But
wow, that is fascinating.
it really is. I had a lot of fun doing it. Fun, in terms of,
But
not like
you got the right
yeehaw.
makeup for this.
Thanks.
I can see it. I mean, I'd want to negotiate with you if I was in that situation.
It's funny because I've been in certain trainings and stuff, and my training from being on the tactical negotiations team, where they put me into like a practical scenario or a scenario where you're acting out with some other actors, and people were like, I'm done, like after 5 minutes. But I'm lucky that way, right? And like I said, anybody can fight anyone else into handcuffs, and I've done it, right? Yeah. But it takes a little bit of finesse and a little bit more brain power to be able to talk them into handcuffs. Right. And I think that's key, because in this line of work, we're not getting any good PR, right? We're not getting any good press on what we do. And if I go to Fifth City,
that's a problem. That's why you're here.
Exactly, right?
Right.
You know,
we need to change that.
it's not all about going to Fifth City on the knuckle train. You know, we really do care, and I'm not going to say every single cop out there is perfect. Nobody's perfect, right?
Right. Nor in
But-
any profession.
Absolutely. I
Right.
mean, people make mistakes. People are human. They're going to fall prey to emotions. Their fuse is going to get shorter and shorter. Sooner or later, somebody's going to step on that one last nerve that they've got, and then they snap and they get ticked off, and mistakes happen.
Yeah.
But you know,
And, you know, there's with the badge, there's a authority.
right,
You know, if I go out on the street and I say stop, it doesn't work.
right.
You go out on the street and say stop, it works.
Sometimes.
Most of it should work, but that's a major responsibility. That kind of authority. I mean, when kids see you,
Sure.
people look at you different,
They do.
and there's a power in that. I mean, in a good way,
Right.
an opportunity.
Exactly. I
be
feel like Peter
used.
Parker. You know, with great power comes great responsibility.
Yes.
Right.
Right.
For those of you that don't know, that's Spider-Man.
Right. I just saw
but-
that the other day.
That's a great movie.
Yeah.
But all of them. But you know, it's interesting because when I put the uniform on, and I think I speak for the majority of law enforcement out there, when we put the uniform on, there's a switch that happens. Whether we're working patrol or custody or any other uniformed assignment or any non-uniformed assignment, plain clothes, once you put the gear that you're going to be wearing when you're on duty on, there's a switch that changes in your head, and you become something different. Not Superman. There's no hero complex, but it's that mindset. And it's a mindset where we're constantly aware of things around us and constantly aware of what we project in society.
Yeah.
So, you know, I walk into a Starbucks and kids will come up and ask for a sticker, or parents will, you know, say, "Hey, say hello to my son or my daughter," or something, and it's a huge deal. It really
Yeah,
is.
it
And,
is.
you know, you got to have a good sense of responsibility to what it is that you project, and that positive image, not always the hardcore cop, you know.
Yeah.
It's
The
always showing
negative
up.
stuff that you see in the media.
Right.
Yeah, that is a big responsibility. And now you've talked with kids. You've done. I want to get into active shooter training and stuff you've done, but I mean you've spoken to kids. You've spoken to 5,000 kids on.
I used to
the
teach
DARE
DARE.
program.
Yes.
What's your message to them?
Oh, geez. Well, DARE is no longer taught in Ventura County. We still have vestiges of DARE throughout the nation, I'm sure, but it's not a LAPD-run organization anymore. It's a private organization. But, you know, I taught DARE back before the turn of the century, which really sounds kind of cool to say. And the message is basically scripted for DARE, but a lot of stuff that I would say, and it's funny because I've been probably using this miniature speech for 27 years, even longer, because I did it with inmates in custody, and I said, I would always tell kids that there's only one thing in life that you control, and I tell this to adults, arrestees, people in crisis, anything. There's only one thing in life that you control, and that one thing controls everything that happens to you, literally. And what is that one thing? And you think to yourself, what is that one thing? Choice. The choices that you make control everything that happened to you. Do this or don't. What you choose determines the consequences.
Right.
Now, keep in mind, you fall prey to destiny, fate, stuff that is beyond your control. So despite your choices, you may make the right choice and the bad thing or the wrong outcome happens to you. That's a fact of life. Life has a way of messing with our plans infinitely, right?
Yeah.
But the one thing that you have control over is the choice that you make, and with that, the majority of everything that happens to you is your fault. And then responsibility is not out here. Responsibility is here.
Right.
Accountability is here first. And
Right.
if you did the right thing, then who failed you? And that's when you point the finger outside. So that's the message that I would try to convey. Make
So
the right
good.
choices.
It's really good. And did you enjoy that?
I did. You can only do it for so long because, you know, booger pickers are a hard breed to deal with. But they're fine. They're fun, and it's funny that later in my career, a few years back, I was at the academy as a TAC officer or like a drill instructor for the military. During my 4 years at the academy, I had half a dozen former DARE students that I put through the DARE program when they were
Really?
table topplers, 12 years old. Here they were 10, 15 years later going through the academy, and I was their staff officer.
Really?
Which was really cool.
Wow, that is really cool. We're talking about law enforcement. I mean, I think the only thing I think sometimes we don't think about is what would life be like if we didn't have that blue line,
right?
I just, there's been some talk about the police and whatever it is, and I just think sometimes I think we need to step back and realize how blessed we are to have order. Order is good.
Sure.
And you guys bring order, and so I mean I just think that there needs to be a little bit more perspective and gratitude about, because we wouldn't like it if it was the alternative.
Right. I totally agree.
The good guys with the guns, we don't want to see the alternative.
Absolutely. The interesting thing about that, going back to the standing in line at the coffee shop with kids and so forth, and I've been there multitude times, and Infinite Cops will tell you this. They're standing in line at the coffee shop, and kids saying something, and parents come up and say, "Hey, Johnny, Susie, you better behave, or I'm going to have this man arrest you." And I've stopped these parents, and I say, "Oh, no, Susie, Johnny, I'm not going to arrest you. I'm going to arrest your mom or your dad for not being good parents."
Oh.
And then I pull the parents aside and I say, don't tell kids I'm going to arrest them, because when they need the police or when they get in trouble, what are they going to think? That the cops are going to be there to arrest them. And that's really where I think society, and the idea behind it is well intended, right? Parents are not doing that to instill fear, but they unconsciously do that because it's that message that's being communicated. And what I think there needs to be in society is, a certain, I'm going out on a limb here, right?
Yeah.
But bear with me, it's a good ride. So there needs to be a certain amount of defunding that occurs in law enforcement, because police officers are expected to be the law keepers, the peacekeepers, the enforcers of the law, the ones that protect others, the ones that respond and run when everybody else is running this way. They're running towards the threat. They need to be the first aid, first responders. They need to be the caregivers, the social workers, the divorce mediation counselors, the in-crisis counselors, the psychologists, the race car drivers, as we were talking earlier. All of these things. And quite frankly, when people give one profession all of those duties, they hold them up to an expectation very similar to what we expect God to do for us, or very similar to what we expect, perfect to be.
Right.
And we're not that.
Yeah, that's true.
We're humans, right? And so when you take some of those things off and you reallocate them to other people to help, right?
Right.
Now, in my career, I've pulled up a hose and climbed a ladder and helped firefighters put fires out, right? I've helped save pets, right? I've done animal control duties, fire department duties. I've done CPR, done paramedic duties, all of those things. We do that, and that's the norm. But I'm talking about those things where we're considered experts when we really aren't. And that, I think, is where that change, that shift needs to be for law enforcement, because
where
there's
more support.
There's more support, because now we're doing what it is that we're supposed to do.
Right. That's a good point.
And not that we can't do a certain amount of that to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But I think what that does is it sets us up for failure in this profession.
Yeah, you're not a social worker.
No.
Right.
And in my department, I'm very blessed to work for Ventura County. I've got a great department. We are one of the best trained agencies in the state, if not the nation. Having been at the academy for 4 years, I can vouch for that. We go through stringent recertifications for everything that we do in our profession on a daily basis. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. There's always room for improvement. But, I work with a great amount of people that really hold their job close to their heart and enjoy it. They love what they do. And then I also work with, the guys that are like, I freaking hate this job, I want to retire, that happens, you get tired. Your job, your career, your passion, your vocation is what you make it.
Yeah.
So that's why I say mindset and choice.
Yeah. So good. I'm learning a lot. The senior deputy with a sense of humor. We found him.
Sometimes. Not everybody thinks so, though.
I want to not to get negative, but I do want to talk about this active shooter thing because we right, you know, it's been a little while in the country since we've had a big one, and so we're all kind of now not thinking about it. But
Right.
when it happens, and it's happened a lot, it gets a lot of attention. And I know you've done active shooter training. And I'm not asking you to just give me the solution to it,
Right.
to this issue. But we've seen this recurring with schools, with businesses,
Sure.
with major outdoor gatherings. Las Vegas happened, and all these different. But what is your approach when you're doing active shooter training? Well, to the average person,
Right.
what do you do? What do you say?
Well, my assignment currently is I'm in jail. But for the last 3.5 years, I worked in our community resource unit for the city of Camarillo. And in that capacity, I was the youth services coordinator. So I managed 4 SROs, went to the schools and dealt with the schools to assist the SROs in their jobs. I also did a lot of active shooter phenomenon research and training as to what leads to a person becoming an active shooter or an active assailant. Shooter is just one thing, but this is something that occurs around the globe. We don't hear so much about it in different countries because in America we glorify the gun and gun control, and that's one of the big cancers of debate in society. So the psychological makeup of a person who snaps, right? Whether it's the borderline shooting, Route 91 in Las Vegas, Jim O'Brien in Oxnard PD back in 1991 or 2 when he was shot by a guy that went to the post office or wanted to go to shoot people up where he worked. There's any number of things that constitute that. So you can't really do pre-crime and figure out, like, you know, thought crime, what's going to happen and what makes a person and arrest them before they do it. But we can only educate ourselves to understand some of those factors and set flags up, right? When the hair in the back of your neck stands up when somebody walks into a place that you're at, like a restaurant or whatever, that's what I'm referring to.
Right.
So what I do to teach the public, schools, faculties, administrators, business owners, small businesses, Rotary clubs and so forth, is what to do in the event of an active shooter. And basically our department endorses the Run, Hide, Fight program, which basically you run, get yourself away, you hide if you can't get away, or if you're hiding and that barricaded area that you're in gets compromised and the active assailant comes there, you fight. You fight like your life depends on it, because it does. And it's, you know, a little bit more in depth than that, but also see something, say something. And what I mean by that is, we all get that weird feeling, you know? You know it. There's not a person on the planet that doesn't, you know, go into a situation and go, that one's off.
Right.
I'm going to watch this one. Cops, we always sit with our back to the wall or something so that we can see the door and we can see the restaurant or whatever.
I do that.
Yeah. Family members and friends that don't see me on a regular basis, they're always, you know, when I'm talking to them like this, I'm looking around whenever we're having a conversation, like, pay attention to me. And I'm like, I'm just looking around. Don't worry, I'm listening. But but that's, pay attention to that. So if you see something that looks out of place, you see something that indicates that that one's a little bit off.
Right.
Say something about it. Not necessarily like, yeah, that guy smells funny and he looks funny and he's dressed like a homeless person. Maybe he's homeless. I'm gonna call the cops on him. That's not what I mean.
Right.
I mean, if you're at work and you hear somebody say, "Somebody move my stapler. I'm gonna burn this place down." That's when you say something, right? You know, because there's all these indicators. But
So like vigilance.
Absolutely, be aware of your surroundings.
Yeah.
I use this analogy when relating to the common public, right? Society in general. There are those in society who, when walking through the airport terminal, just as an example, will, when they need to orient, stop right where they're walking, in the middle of the terminal, and make everybody walk around them while they're figuring out where to go. That makes as much sense as in when you get lost on the freeway, you stop in the #1 lane on the 405. Not a good idea, right? Be aware, have self-aware, or be self-aware, and move to the side. Get out of the mainstream, figure yourself out. Now you're being aware of what's going on around you, and you're not being you're not being what's going on around you. You are now aside from it.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Somebody stops on the freeway in front of you and you're like, what are you doing? You know, keep going. They're what's going on. Or
Right.
rather, what's not going on because they're not moving.
Right.
Does it make sense?
Right.
Okay.
Self-awareness, see something, say something,
Yeah.
run, hide, fight.
Yeah. For in terms of active shooter
I
situation.
think we just need so much training in this. I'm thinking about schools,
Sure.
especially. And so SRO, that's a resource officer?
School resource
School
officer,
resource.
yes.
So that's somebody on campus who is armed.
It's basically a deputy or an officer who's working at a school in particular, or a number of schools that they're assigned to.
And they're
So,
responsible for the safety of that campus.
It's like a patrol officer has a patrol beat. The school resource officer, their beat is the school.
Yeah.
So
I
they
like
respond
that.
to all calls. They respond to it's PR. It's going out and talking to kids. It's
Right.
not sitting there and
Right.
playing basketball with them and being their buddy. That's a little bit different. They're there to be accessible by students because let's face it, once a kid gets into the 8th grade, two things happen. They know everything and they don't want to deal with anybody, right?
Right,
So
right.
from 8th grade until high school, kids are kind of rebellious or they're inquisitive, they're curious, they test the waters. So if you have a deputy out there, an officer that's out there, they can walk up and say, hey, so let me ask you a question. And you get some really good dialogue going on that way.
Yeah.
But they're also there in case fights happen, drugs are found or whatever, and arrests need to be made.
Yeah. I just think that's important for every school. I mean, I just think having that person there who is armed,
Right.
so it doesn't take 7 minutes or whatever, is just critical.
Absolutely.
But well, thank you for what you've done.
Oh, I appreciate it. We
we're-
appreciate the support.
Yeah, well, we honor you and we're grateful for your service. And I just think these are the best people on the planet. That's my opinion. So you don't have to react to that.
Not
And he's
all of
funny.
us are.
And he's funny. Most of you. He's funny too. Thanks for coming.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.